Drugs aren't made to heal.
Hold up, Dr. Price. Say that again?
Drugs aren't made to heal. They're made to treat. And there's a huge difference between treatment and actually curing and healing.
Make life sweet.
Tell the people who you are one time.
Dr. Bobby Price, your plant-based pharmacist and nutritionist, also author of Education Over Medication.
Why should people hear what you have to say?
I have a very unique position in that, I've been on both sides of the fence. So I've worked for the FDA, the regulatory industry. I've also worked in a clinical setting in the hospitals. I've worked here in the US, I've worked abroad in Japan. And so I have a very unique perspective on modern medicine and a lot of experience. But in these last almost 8 years, I spent the majority of my sort of re-education and unlearning, learning more holistic ways to heal, using herbs, using holistic techniques. And so I literally have been on both sides of the fence. And now that I take a more holistic approach to healing, my message and my philosophies are sort of curtailed to that. And that doesn't always go along with the mainstream way of thinking.
Wow. So I bet they don't like what you're sharing, right?
Not only with they, but also with colleagues as well. A lot of people don't agree with how I think around how we should heal and prevent disease. And I understand why they don't agree with how I think and what I believe, because we're not taught this in school. We're not taught proper nutrition. And when I say proper nutrition, I mean nutrition that's aligned with our nature and nature in and of itself. We're not taught things about herbs in school.
That's so true.
We're not taught about holistic modalities like acupuncture. We're not taught about these things, Reiki healing and Reiki energy. We're not taught about those things. And so when you hear them being talked about and used in practice, quite often when healthcare professionals hear this, they think it's a bunch of, esoteric woohoo. And so I understand why they don't necessarily agree with me. And it makes sense. They don't have that education. And so it also makes sense when I, have conversations with people who have cancer, things like stomach cancer and colorectal cancer, and they ask their oncologist or their GI doctor, hey, should I eat anything different now that I have this diagnosis? And they tell them, no, there's nothing you can do about your diet. You can eat whatever you want. So I also understand why they think the way they do too.
Because this has been so censored, what do you want people to know?
The one thing that I want people to sort of know and understand is that this is not a new thing, censoring. There's been a war on natural medicine, for the past 120 years.
That's all the modern medicine's been around for?
Modern medicine in and of itself, the way we think about modern medicine with the FDA and drugs, that is really only about 110 years old. And most people don't know that. And so when we're having the discussion around what is treatment, what is healing, quite often that's the only option that it is discussed, is because there's been this war on natural healing for so long.
What's the difference between natural healing and modern medicine?
And so to give you a little bit of background on how modern medicine came to be, I'll first have to start with how medicine was always viewed. And what I mean by that is you can go back 10,000 years into Egypt and you'll see the Ebers Papyrus papers where there's natural remedies explaining how to use herbs and natural methods to heal people over 10,000 years ago. And then several hundred years later, you'll hear about Hippocrates telling people that you are what you eat and to use food as medicine. Okay?
Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food.
You can go even further down the line and see over and over the development of Ayurvedic medicine, the development of traditional Chinese medicine, the development of herbal medicine. All around the world, people using this. So I always tell people when you really look at it, Traditional medicine that we call modern medicine today isn't traditional at all because, again, it's only 110 years old. However, the natural medicine is actually traditional medicine because there's over thousands of 10,000 years of observational data that you can look at of us as humans using herbs, specific herbs, to heal certain modalities. So there's so much observational data, there's so much historical data that we can look at and compare when it comes to natural medicine. Again, over 10,000 years, we can look at that type of data. But here and again, we only have about 110 years of data as it relates to any type of sort of healing around modern medicine or drug therapy as we know it today.
What or who caused all of this to change?
In the early 1900s is when things really began to change. And they began to change because Rockefeller got involved with modern medicine, or got involved with medicine. And Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, was an oil magnate. So he owned a company called Standard Oil, which was essentially a monopoly on the oil industry because he owned about 90% of the oil industry. And when monopolies became illegal, the company got broken down into several companies that we know today as Chevron, Exxon, and Mobil. Okay. Now, when these companies got broken down, John Rockefeller was trying to figure out how he could get his hands into modern medicine or into the health field. And one of the things that he discovered in his own business, which was oil, was the scientists were discovering that many of the vitamins that we know today were being discovered in oil products. Okay. Now, I know that sounds really odd, but they were discovering certain vitamins. So, the first vitamin that was discovered was vitamin A. The second vitamin that was discovered was vitamin B, and so on and so on. And so when he discovered these vitamins in these petrochemicals, he saw an opportunity in his mind where we can use oil or the byproducts or the waste products of oils to create these things that could be sold to people in healthcare. Okay. And so in an attempt to figure out how to get involved in the medicine, he went to Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie linked him up with a guy who created what is known today as the Flexner Report.
What is the Flexner Report?
This report essentially was the cause of almost 50% of all medical schools closing in the U.S. and pretty much 90% of all Black medical schools closing in the U.S. Okay, and essentially what the idea of the report was to centralize medicine, and also to make sure that the only things that would be handed out from practitioners of medicine was going to be patented drugs. Okay. And that was one of the things that Rockefeller really put his money into, because he donated about $100 million. So think about this, him donating $100 million in the early 1900s.
100 million over 100 years ago would be how much now?
That would be close to somewhere near, if not $1 billion, at least close. And so he put $100 million into this. Okay. And part of what that $100 million was going to do was act as grants for these schools who were willing to practice medicine in the way that the Flexner Report said that they should practice medicine. Okay. And one of the primary schools that were used as an example was Johns Hopkins University. Okay. And so schools that were compliant with practicing medicine in the way that the Flexner Report told them that they should practice medicine, these are the schools that got funding. The schools that refused to practice medicine in that way, and what I mean by practice medicine in the way that the Flexner Report wanted them to, and I'm surmising, but essentially what it wanted them to do was remove everything natural.
So nothing natural was allowed.
No using herbs, no using Reiki healing, no using chiropractic, no using acupuncture, no using anything holistic. The only thing that you can use were these patented drugs. Okay? And as a result, this new wave of thinking around healing began. Okay? Because now all new practitioners were coming into the wave of, when I prescribe therapy only through drugs, as opposed to prior to this timing, you can use multiple sort of modalities to heal, whether it be sun therapy, sitting out in the sun, whether it be changing the diet, whether it be, mental therapy, whatever it may be. Before, there was this sort of holistic approach to healing, and now it was only use drugs, use therapies, only approved through the flexible report. And schools became almost obligated to follow this because many of them were bankrupt, by having to create new laboratories at their school, bankrupt by having to create new standards at their school that they weren't able to uphold. Because a lot of the student attendance dropped as well, because there was also new standards, and I will admit is pretty good. There were new standards on what it would take to become a practitioner. Okay. And so it made it very difficult, and it made it damn near impossible to include natural therapy in the hospital setting.
So this is how the war on medicine started, huh?
This is how the war on medicine truly began. And the reason why it was a war on medicine is because of this. It's not that the natural therapies didn't work. It was the real issue was that natural therapies are cheap. And what I mean by that is all drugs have to be patented. You can't patent anything that is natural. You understand that? You can't patent anything that is natural, that is of nature. But what you can do is take a chemical, let's say in a plant called foxglove. Okay, you take the active ingredient that is inside of foxglove that, let's say for instance, you could use foxglove, a plant, for a heart arrhythmia or for a heart effect. Okay. And what you would do is, instead of using foxglove, which back in the days, somebody could easily go into the back of their yard and find, or on a farm and find, for cheap. Now what you do is you take the active ingredient that causes the effect or the therapeutic effect, and you create a synthetic version of it. And that synthetic version, because it's not real, because it's not nature, can actually be patented. And then you can call it a drug. And now you can sell this for whatever you want to sell it for because it's your patent. Okay? That's essentially where the war on drugs began. Because of the issue or the difference between something that is natural, you can go find out in nature, that's cheap, okay, versus something that is synthetic and is a knockoff version of plants, because most drugs were made from plants. They just were the synthetic derivative of those plants.
More people need to know this. Where can we learn more?
Now, I'm having this conversation with you today to help you understand why there's been so much censorship, as it relates around medical information today. What has become very popular in the last couple of years is using food as medicine. People like Dr. Sebi and others have made it popular, and not only popular, but trendy, to use food as medicine, to use herbs as medicine. And because it's become so popular and so widely accepted, whereas in the past, like you mentioned, using food as medicine, people would laugh you out of the room. But now you actually have real life examples of people changing their diets and literally reversing conditions in their bodies. And so because it's become so popular, now this war on natural medicine has grown and become inflamed. And so influencers like myself and others are sort of being shadow banned and unfortunately being sort of put at the lower end of the total pole when it comes to organic reach.
I know what you mean. What should people know before we go?
What's important for you to know and understand is that, real recognize real. The nature that we eat and consume, that we use as medicine in the form of herbs, in the form of food, when it comes into contact with our bodies recognize it. And not only does it recognize it, it's capable of absorbing it. Okay. Not only is it capable of absorbing it, it's capable of utilizing it. Okay. And that is what is the major key. When the body recognizes something and it's made for the body, it's made to heal the body, and it does heal the body, then that becomes direct competition for something that not only isn't made to heal, because drugs aren't made to heal, they're made to treat. And there's a huge difference between treatment and actually curing and healing.
How did you get to where you are now?
My journey is that I went from pills to plants. I use food as medicine to heal myself of high blood pressure. I was diagnosed with high blood pressure when I was 16. I lived with it for 12 years. And after 12 years, I realized that I needed to do something about it or I was going to die early death. And out of desperation, I tried a plant-based diet. It healed me. It not only normalized my blood pressure, but it got rid of the inflammation in my body. It got rid of the brain fog. It boosts my energy. It slimmed my waist. It slimmed my whole body, to be honest with you. And you can't get one medication that can do two of those things, let alone all of those things at once without any side effects. And so that's why I named my book Vegetation Over Medication, is because I truly believe that food as medicine is the foundation, not only for maintaining your health and keeping your health, but also for reversal of certain conditions in the body.
Many thanks to Dr. Bobby Price. You can find the links to follow him in the description below. Make life better, make life sweet.